All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's KETIV Autodesk Virtual Academy session, all about Inventor Styles, Inventor Styles 101, if I may. I'm Nigel Mbayak. I've seen you, every week here for the past 6 months, so I'd like to thank you all for coming back. But today, I'm joined with special guests, Javier Chavez, one of the application engineers here on the KETIV team, and Daniel Hwang, who will be doing your presentation. He's also on the Lifeline team with me here. So today will be a great one. As usual, if you do have any questions, feel free to post them in the GoToWebinar panel that you have. We'll be more than happy to answer those either during the session if applicable or at the end if necessary. But we'll definitely make sure to cover them all. If we don't get to yours, we'll definitely follow up with you afterwards. Also, I'd like to note that if you do have to leave early and you are going to miss some of the session, you can always find the recordings on YouTube. They're posted shortly after the webcast ends. Today's probably done sometime this afternoon. And that YouTube channel is youtube.com/KETIV Technologies. So if you need that, it's available to you. So with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over here to Daniel and get started.
Thanks, Nigel. As Nigel mentioned, today we're going to be going over some Inventor styles. It's going to be the basics, but even with the basics, if you guys can master these and if you guys can really go delve into it, get really detailed, you can really leverage Inventor to be a very powerful tool in your drafting and your drawings. So with that, just get right into it. The goals for today's presentation will be very simple. It will be 3 of them. First, it will be quickly and easily editing styles in a drawing, styles that already exist. So for instance, if you have dimensions, balloons, or tables even, that already exist in a drawing, and let's say you received it from a customer or something, you can quickly edit those to match styles that you already have and styles that you prefer. So that'll be the first goal. Second, we'll be working with the style defaults so that we can customize those for drawings at the very beginning, and then we can forget about it, and it'll be the same throughout the entire drawing and drafting. And then going a step further, if you like those settings, and you can save those to templates, and you can save them to be used in the future going forward, just always available to you at all times. And then taking that even one step further, we're going to be going into saving those styles to libraries, whether it's a local library or a network library. Saving them to libraries will allow for just better integration, not only with yourself, but if you want as an option with your company and with your peers as well. So those are the 3 goals that we're going to try to tackle today. So with that, we'll just delve right into the presentation and switch over to Inventor. Right. So very generally, this is a very easy sample that I found on Inventor's website. It's a water heater, and as you can see, it has dimensions already in it. Let's say I receive this from a customer, and the customer likes fractions. Fractions are fine, but I'm partial to decimals, and I just want to edit it this one time for this drawing. And yeah, it's very quick, very easy, but let me go ahead and show you how to do that. So I'm just going to select any of these dimensions. It could be this one that has a fraction or this one that doesn't. The great thing about this is it's going to edit all of the dimensions that exist and that match the object type. So I'm going to right-click that dimension and hand down to this Edit Dimension style. It's going to pop up a window. This is our style and standard editor. As you can see here, it already shows me exactly where I need to go, what I need to edit. There's all these different tabs, but what I'm focused on for this specific exercise is the format. As you can see here, there's a drop-down. It's going to show me different formats. I want the decimal one, so I'm going to click that. Not only do I want decimal, but I want to control the precision. That's a little too much precision. I want maybe just 2 decimal places, and I want to keep the 0. So I'm going to go ahead and save and close this. And as you can see, it went from fractions to decimals. Not only that, the whole numbers also show trailing zeros. And that's what I like, so I'm going to keep it that way. The great thing about this is it also changes the dimensions from here on out. So any new dimensions that I may add, I'll show you here. Will also be decimals. Just click OK there. But yeah, as you can see, it's 54.79, nice decimal, no fractions, very easy to read for me, and how I like it. So yeah, that was very quickly the dimension styles and how to quickly edit those. I'm also going to go over, in this drawing, some balloon styles. So it's a different type of style, but just as easy to edit. Like the dimension style, we're going to right-click this balloon here. And as you can see, there's a edit balloon style at the bottom here. And basically the same window, but now it's for balloons. What I want to change is the shape, let's say. The circle is nice, but I actually want the square. So I'm going to go to this shape drop down, and I'm going to click rectangular and hit save and close. Yeah, and now it's a different format. It shows me not only the item number, but also the quantity, and it's also in its box, which I like. And then again, any balloons I add from here on out will also follow that same formatting, and it's great. And so the last thing we can edit is, or what I want to show you is this parts list or the tables style, and that's also managed through that editor and the manager. Again, right-clicking that table, I can go to edit parts list style. Now this is a little bit more complicated just because the standard shows different widths. So if you have to actually take the time to edit those widths, and if you don't, when I change this, when I update this, it's going to show you a very, very different box than what you already see. But what I want to actually edit is the column chooser. This will actually allow me to add different properties or reorder them. I personally like the quantity property at the end. I'm going to move that down a little bit. And okay. Maybe we'll change these widths as well to be like 1. This one can be also 1. For material, I want it to be the largest.
So Daniel, I was going to say, you know, in editing that, you know, the properties that you're going to show, you know, we've got 4 properties. There's maybe some other missing properties, and if it's your, you know, company standard to show something like description, same thing. You can right-click on that, edit that style, and add the description, and it's going to be one of those things you're going to now consistently get throughout that drawing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I was mentioning with the column chooser. As Javier pointed out, we can actually go to these properties and we can add, like he said, description by clicking it and double-clicking it like I did, or hitting the add button. You could again move this up or down as you wish, and then also change the width of that. I want mine to be like 4. As you notice with this one, it's a little bit different from the balloons and the dimensions. When I hit save and close, it didn't update right away. The reason for that is actually you have to manually update this one. Go to your annotate tab at the top, and then you just want to refresh it basically. You can hit the same one, and it should update here. There we go. As you can see, it's a lot bigger, and that's because of those width inputs that I put in. And so if it doesn't really match, if you don't know the exact dimensions, you can always do it and then manually move it up and down as you see fit, like this, and so on. Yeah, like that, guys. So now we have items and then quantity at the end. We also added a description column, although we don't have any descriptions, but yeah, this is a very easy way to edit that parts list as you want it. Yeah, so on and so forth. So next we're going to move on to messing with these defaults a little bit when we don't have any views in them. First, we're actually going to have to close out of these because it's going to require us to go into our projects folder, projects file. So I'm going to close out of these. I'm not going to save any changes. Again, I'm not going to save any changes. To make any changes to your project file, you do have to be outside of all your files. You have to be closed out of everything. If I hit the projects menu at the top, you can see here different projects. I have this AVA one, and mine's already set to read write, but your guys may be set to read only. The way to change that is to right click it like I've done here, and then you can actually select for read write as I've done, and it'll change it. This will allow us to make any changes to our styles manager. We can save it to the styles library or vice versa, and so you have to save and then hit done.
In fact, I think maybe a lot of customers will try to do this or have read up on this, and one of the things they'll find is they'll find some options grayed out when it comes to editing styles, and it's typically grayed out because of that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's very important to have these permissions, because without them, you're going to run into a lot of obstacles, and you're going to be wondering why. But it's very simple. It's just it's actually a project setting that you just have to edit. So if you go ahead and change those and save those, you can start a new drawing file. And now from the very beginning, we're gonna start with that styles manager. And unlike right-clicking on a dimension to open it up, we're gonna go to the top Manage tab, as you can see here. And then we'll see this panel for styles and standards, and then there's a styles editor button. That's what we're gonna want. It's gonna open it up, and a good way to check is to see if yours is read-write is at the top here. It'll say library read-write, which gives you all the permissions that you need to make any of those changes and to save them.
And it's probably important to differentiate that, you know, it's not like it's going to keep us keep us from making changes locally to this drawing. It's going to keep us from making changes to that library, exactly, which is in a separate location. And Daniel explained some of that there.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll get to that in a little bit, specifically what that library is and how we can edit it and leverage it so that we can use it in our company and use it powerfully. But looking at the style editor, we're going to be starting at the top level. This is the default standard. This is basically the umbrella for which all of your other styles are managed and kind of looked at.
And there's like styles for everything, right? I mean, we've been talking about dimensions, some of the obvious things that you see on your drawing, but you know, this goes even deeper, and it'll even control, you know, what your lines look like for visible edges as opposed to hidden edges, what your lines look like for center lines as opposed to, you know, the dimension lines. So it controls, you know, the layering. It automatically recognizes these objects and automatically assigns them to them.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of what this controls.
Yeah. Even on top of that, it'll even manage what presets will show when you do like a drop-down menu, like for instance this line weight, or view preferences, different edge displays, as Javier mentioned, or how you want your projections to show up depending on where you're at or who you're doing a project for. You may want different angles, maybe a first angle or a third angle.
Yeah, if anybody's worked with drawings, European drawings, sometimes, you know, as you project to the right, you're getting a different view, and that's because of that first angle projection setting. You know, they typically work that way in European countries sometimes, and we work with third angle. That's what we're used to. So this is what it controls. This is where that information is coming from.
Yeah. You can also manage default labels for when you bring in these different views, available styles. But I think the most important tab here is probably this object defaults. This is where it's going to show you specifically what your drawing is going to use as default when you bring in these different objects. And so if I hit this pencil button here, it's going to take me exactly to where I can edit those.
So this is basically like a style with another style in it,
exactly,
embedded, right?
So it's nesting that style in that default standard. It's an object default style nested within the default standard style. And so I can go here and I can actually edit these. There's a drop-down menu for all of them. If I want to filter, I can filter them by dimension objects or leader objects, right? So all of these are possible. If I go to the default dimensions,
and that makes it way easier to look at.
Exactly. So there's way less. Without it, there's like a bunch of object types. So this will shorten the list, and you can see exactly what you want to see. And as we see here, we see that the default ANSI is used in all of these. So now we know that if we edit or change the default ANSI, all those changes are going to affect all of these angle dimensions.
And this probably gives you the option too, right, to differentiate, you know, like baseline dimensions, set them to a different style. If for some reason your baseline dimensions need 3 decimal places and everything else needs 2, you can create multiple dimension styles and assign them according to those types of dimensions. So it actually knows the difference, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is basically like the master list, and you can just set exactly what you want, when you want it, where you need it, how you want it, all right? And so the best practice here is to see here and kind of change it as you see fit. If you want like 4 different ones, you can change it to 4 different ones, or you can actually go to the dimensions themselves. There's a few options here. You can right-click and new style. What this will do is whatever dimension style you have, it'll copy it with the same exact settings, but then you can name it something else. Another option you have is to rename the style, and what this will do is just rename the style locally so that it doesn't affect your style library. This is actually the recommended practice, either the new or the rename, that we recommend to users of style editors. The reason for that is because this will avoid any style conflicts with the library. And by avoiding style conflicts, you'll avoid error messages when you open up new templates.
And that's one of the most common things, probably calls you get. We just moved to Inventor 2017, and when I open my templates, it gives me some message about style conflicts.
Exactly.
And basically, what does that mean? I mean, what does that conflict message mean?
That message is basically saying that there's a local style with the same name as the style library, but there's a difference. There was a change made in the local one. That conflict is going to say, oh, it's the same name, so I'm going to default to the style library. Is that okay with you?
So even though you want 3 decimal places, that's what's in your template, it's going to go to maybe 2 decimal places, which is in your library.
Exactly.
And so you want to make sure you get the right one.
Exactly. So if you have that same name and what you want is actually what's in that template file, it's not going to pull it because of that same name conflict. So that's why we recommend the new style or the rename style. That way it avoids that conflict altogether. It'll retain all the changes you make in your template file, not revert back to your style library. And it's less of a headache.
Yeah, just real quick, question from Todd here. When you click the new style, when you're going through there, Daniel, the new style does not create a copy, or it does not create. It creates a copy of the one you've highlighted, correct?
Correct. Yeah, correct. As I noted, the default ANSI is the one that's used in most of these dimension styles. So that's the one I'm going to edit here. If I actually want to rename it to avoid those style conflicts like I mentioned. So I'm going to name it to KETIV default. Right? Now, the great thing about renaming, and one of the reasons why I prefer it, is because if I go back to the object defaults, and I look at the dimension objects, it's actually already set, right? So it saves me the hassle of going through and changing it to, let's say, copy of default, or anything else new I make. So there's that added benefit of doing a rename. And now this is a local change, so it's only to this file so far. Some changes I can make are like in the text. Again, with the text, it's a nested style, so anywhere you see this pencil, it's going to take you to another style to edit. That will edit this one.
So that makes sense to me. I mean, there's text in the dimensions. There's text in leaders. You might want to share that same style, the text style, and use it in dimensions and make sure you're consistent. Use the same Arial font, certain size. So that's why they're nested, right?
Exactly. So to illustrate that, I can show you guys actually this note text ANSI is not only used in dimensions, but it's also used, let's say, in parts tables. If I go to parts tables, you can see this note text ANSI again. So any edits I made to that note text ANSI down here, right? It's going to edit for the parts list. It's also going to edit for the dimensions, and that may be something you want. That may be something your company wants, but actually sometimes it may not be. You may want larger fonts for dimensions than your tables. You may want larger fonts for the tables, and the way to avoid all of that is actually to create a new text like I've done here.
One for your tables, one for your dimensions, if that's what you want to do.
Exactly. So maybe I'll rename this to tables text. Then I'll create a new one for dimensions text, right? And then now I can go to dimension and specifically select for dimension text and how I want that. And then I can save that and then click the pencil to edit it. Maybe I want Comic Sans for whatever reason, or Times New Roman, and I want like a large font, right? And I can save that. But for the tables, I want a smaller font, and I don't want Comic. I do want Comic Sans. I want a very small font. I can save that. And so now my tables will have one font, and my dimensions will have another, and they're not associated anymore because of those changes that I made. If I go to the parts list and I edit this, right? Now there's completely different text. So, yeah. Yeah, and now let's say we made all these changes and it's all good, and we've been working for a while, and all of these changes are good, and we really like it, but we want to use it in the future because this is all the changes we made are again local changes, and so this is where that project file and that the read-write permissions come into play, because we want to save these changes to the library for future use, so that we don't have to deal with this anymore. And so by saving these styles to the library, we can change all of these. It shows us all the ones that we changed, right? So the default, standard, ANSI, the type of object that we're changing, where it was changed, if it's in both the style library and the local one, right? And so if I hit save to library, I want to save this dim text and this KETIV default.
Really, just about anything that's changed, you would want to save to the library to avoid getting those errors, right?
Right, and then the next step would also be to just save as a copy as a template. That way, it's available to be shared. If whoever wants to use these templates, they can pull this template. They can use this template. It'll have those dimension styles, those balloon styles, those table, all the object styles will be there available to them. Because not only did you save it to this library, you also saved it to the file. So one great thing about the saving to the library, though, is you can actually share that library folder on your network. As I've done here, I can actually show you guys. I have this S drive, which I've shared from my computer. I copied my design data folder, which is, it has all the styles, it has all the changes I've made, and I've shared it on this network drive. And now I can actually just go to the application settings of my Inventor by going to Tools, Application Options, right? And the File tab here, it's going to show me where my design data folder should be.
Now the default path for that, right, is typically like on everybody's, I don't know, My Documents or public documents on their machine. So if you made changes and you customized styles and you saved them to that library on your machine, you're the only one who could see those.
Exactly. So mine was actually defaulted to like C, users, etc., etc. I actually changed it to this network one so that other people can use it, and so any changes I make now will change the shared one.
And you'd have to point everybody else to that same shared one and go through the same process of changing that file path to point to that location. So that way everybody's on the same page, right?
Exactly. So now if I tell Javier, hey Javier, I have this shared drive, S design data, you can actually connect to my computer and point to it as your design data folder by going to application options and the file settings. Javier's like, great, let me go ahead and change that. Now we're sharing the same library. We're sharing the same standards, the same decimal places, the same fonts, the same font sizes, etc., etc. Stuff like that. Not only Javier, but anyone else who can connect to my drive. And then the last thing we want to check for is that project file again. The project file not only manages the permissions for your style library, but also where to look for that style library. So if we go again back to that project file, we can see that there is this folder options. If we expand that, the design data, if it says default, it's going to point to wherever it says in your tools and your application options. If it says anything else, if you want to customize it for different projects, you can set it to specific places. If you have, let's say, several different people working on different projects and they all have different design data folders, you can manage those locations with the project file, and now you can share different libraries, right?
And typically I see that when customers are sort of contractors, right, and they work on different projects for different customers. And one customer wants their fonts one way and their dimension styles one way, and so another customer wants their dimension styles a different way. And so switching projects automatically points them to the right styles library at any given time.
Exactly.
So, and the same thing really could be said about templates too, right? So.
Exactly. So that's pretty much it for the live demonstration. As a summary, basically we just went over a quick way, easy way to change styles, dimension styles, balloon styles. But it's not limited to those. Literally, you can change anything in the way you view it by right-clicking and then going to that Edit Styles option. Sometimes it's a little more involved, as you saw with those tables, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. You can change it. We also saw that you can change these defaults to drawing files from the very beginning, and you can set it, forget it, and you know with certainty that whenever you bring in a dimension or a balloon or a text, it's going to be as you set it. We then took those defaults, we saved it to a template for future use. Not only saved it, but we also not only saved it to a template, but also to your library. And the library so that we can avoid any of those style conflicts, style error messages, whatever kind of annoyances that may occur with these styles. To avoid all of that, we worked with those templates and those styles libraries. And then for those of you who want to share these styles with users across your network, we also showed you guys that it's possible to share them with those application options, your project file, and those network locations. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to write them in. We're going to be going to time of Q&A here. Yeah.
Definitely, and we do have a couple of questions here. But first, I just want to iterate, tomorrow we do have a special webcast that's a kind of a dive into the industry collections. So if you don't already know, you've probably seen me on a couple of webcasts before talking about the changes starting August 1st of this month, where like suites don't exist for new purchases anymore. There's a thing called industry collections which exist. We're going to go over all of that, everything you need to know about industry collections. Now that they're out, we have every single detail about them. We can answer all of your questions on industry collections and how your suites are going to act moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and post the link to that in the chat. Make sure to sign up for that if you're interested. Just because you're signed up for AVA doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get an invite to this in the same manner. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into Q&A here.
Yeah, and real quick, something to note that one of the training catalog offerings that we have focuses on advanced documentation, right? And goes into this subject, styles, a little bit more in depth. So just something to consider is a training offering that we provide in the advanced catalog offering that we have in advanced documentation.
Definitely, yeah. And it's going to go over some presentation stuff as well, if I remember correctly. So if that's something that you need to know, go ahead and shoot us an email. We'll definitely be able to answer those questions. So a couple of questions here that are kind of similar. So for people with Vault or vaulted projects, what changes? So where their styles libraries are located, how they save things up and down, templates, etc.
Good question. Some customers decide to put their design data folder in the Vault. We don't typically recommend that, but for whatever reason, sometimes customers just simply want to do that and actually maintain versions of that. It's not necessary. It's not really engineering data per se. So if you're doing that, you need to make changes to the design data. You have to check out the entire folder to be able to write to it, on top of checking out the project. So you have to check out the project, change that setting temporarily to read write, and then check it back in. And same thing with your design data folder, check it back in. Once it's checked back in, okay, and this is one of the reasons we recommend against it, now you have to go to all your users and have them get the latest, greatest version of the project file, right, and the design data folder. Okay, but for the most part, when we do implementations, we typically keep that data outside of the Vault, so you don't have to do the check-in, check-out thing and update people on their or get the latest copy of that file or folder.
Definitely. And then a couple of questions have come in where people have tried to save things, and the option to save them to their folders are grayed out. That option, if I remember correctly, that option is sometimes grayed out just because the folder is set to read only.
Yes.
So make sure that, Daniel, if you want to just jump into your Inventor real quick here and go into the project file, and we'll just reiterate this. We see this a lot at Lifeline where people don't necessarily change the styles library to read-write. It's set to read only. So just make sure if you need to make any changes that it's set to read-write.
Another thought on that, sometimes the design data folder itself in Windows through Windows permissions is set to read only. So changing that is not enough. Most people don't do it, but if somebody in IT is involved, sometimes they like to lock down permissions on some of the shared files. It could be read only, or it might be set, through like group permissions or something. It might be more of an IT thing where they need to go to the folder and give you more control of that. So what you're seeing now are folder permissions through Windows that might be affecting things.
All right, and then this came from David. When placing shared design data folder inside the vault, what file/folders need to be checked out? So like you said, the entire design data folder needs to come out of the vault, as well as the project file?
There really is very specific files that can be checked out. There's STY.XML files. There's a bunch of them. It's always really hard to tell which one is going to control what. So I like to check out the entire folder.
Makes sense. So yeah, just to note, if anyone using Vault, if you have any questions about Vault and some of these edits, feel free to shoot us an email. Lifeline at KETIV, or even questions at KETIV, and we'll be able to answer those for you. Let's see. And then this one comes from David. Can you reiterate the differences between the project design data styles and the application options design data styles?
Yeah. So throughout the projects that you have, if you set the folder options to default, it's always going to point to the path that's set in the Inventor application options. So, you create a new project file and it says default, it's already pointing to whatever is set inside the application options. If, however, you want to change from project to project the folder you're pointing to, then you're going to want to make the change and right-click, and then instead of going to default, change it to an explicit directory, and that might be different from project to project to project. So you can sort of make that change either way, but if it's going to be consistently pointing to, let's say, an F drive, I would do it in the application options. If it's going to change from project to project to project, then I would do it in the project file.
Okay. And then this one comes from Jose. If you have a styles template, but you don't have a shared network drive, how do you share those style changes with other people?
I think what you can do is actually save those to a template. So save them locally, and then share that template, and then you can actually save to the library as you share the template. So each person would have to go to their Manage tab, their Styles editor, and then save each local change to their style library, selecting all the options, yes to all, save. That way all of them have the same library then.
Yeah, so basically you're manually copying the design data, or you can manually copy the design data from machine to machine to machine. It's just a manual process.
Right.
And I don't know if anybody that actually wants to do that or prefers to do that. How do you keep 6 machines all in sync? Even 3 machines would be kind of a pain to do. So if you can find a way to save it to the network, even sharing a folder on your own machine, just make sure your machine's always available. It could make life easier.
Definitely. Let's see here. And then this is an important question here from David. Does each new release have new design data information? And then this is just following that question. Is it best to start with the default design data folder per release and then migrate all of your customizations from a previous release into the new one?
So first question, does every release have its own design data? Yes, everyone has its own design data folder, and they make some slight changes to some of the styles. So if you had templates that used to work and now you're pointing to the 2017 design data folder, suddenly it might bark at you and say, hey, these are different than the design data.
Definitely.
Nothing wrong with simply taking your existing design data folder, continuing to work with that from there on forward. But what you want to do is actually go through the help files and read the migration part of things, because sometimes there are benefits or new files in there that you'll want, and if you don't use or somehow migrate to a different version of that design data folder, you'll miss out on some of those benefits. So if you go to that, there's usually a path where it'll show you how to get your styles from your 2016 design data folder to a 2017 version and take advantage of whatever new features are in the...
Or like new fonts and
new
stuff
fonts
that they've added.
or something, yeah.
For sure. And then this one comes from Ray. Could you share data folders through OneDrive? I'm not even sure.
So technically the answer is yes, right? It's just a cloud, maybe something that you can set up through the saved up to the cloud and have everybody have access to the one cloud drive.
Mm-hmm.
As long as the path is the same, it should be easy enough to do. So yeah, it should be possible. How well does it work? I don't know when you make updates, how quickly does it get it to each one of the users? That's hard to tell, but yeah, that should work.
Definitely. And then, like I mentioned, some people were having some issues with sound and audio today. So we have recorded the session on my computer here locally. We'll have that up on the YouTube channel. So if you did miss it for either technical difficulties or if you missed some things just because you're busy, because we all know everyone's at work, it'll be up on the YouTube channel shortly after the session today, and you'll be able to see that as well as all of our other sessions. And let's see. I think I've covered everything. Let me go ahead and just make sure here. And there you go. One here just came in from David. If all my users are using the same project, is it better to use the project folder to share design data or set each machine to the design data file on the server?
So I don't think that's necessarily the question that determines, which method you'll use. I mean, basically, if you're always consistently using the same design data, I'd say use the option in the file or in the application options inside of Inventor. If you have to change from project to project, you work on different jobs with different customers, and they require different standards or different fonts or different dimension styles, then I would go ahead and change that setting through the project file. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, it just depends on your particular case. If you have whatever, like how you mentioned,
customer-specific projects versus maybe one project that you use throughout your company. I mean, there's companies that use one project and that's it.
Yep.
And so it makes sense. You're not going to change from project to project to project. Just do it in the file or the application options.
Mm-hmm. And then Ray mentioned here that he does the same thing with sheet metal files. He has them shared through design data folders. So it's not just limited here to dimension styles or parts list styles. It's kind of across the board here.
Yeah, we focused on drawings mostly because that's where it really comes into play. That's the call we get the most. I'd say second to that would be sheet metal styles, and eventually there's even styles that control the way your parts look, right? But the most important one is the one that we actually print from, that affects our prints that we actually manufacture from, and those are the drawings. So
definitely, yeah, and that's something we do see. And like Javier mentioned, there is some stuff with like lighting and stuff within Inventor. So with that, covered all of the questions. Hopefully I'll see some of you guys tomorrow for the dive into the industry collections webcast that we have. Make sure to sign up. The link is in there in the chat box, so if you want to do so, go ahead and click through there. Again, I'd like to thank Hav for being here, as well as Daniel for giving us this great presentation. And thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next week. I'll actually be presenting next week on thermal simulation using Fusion 360. So with that, I'll leave you. See you next week.